All right, welcome everybody to the Southeastern Region RAC meeting. This meeting is being held in person in Green River, as well as being streamed live on YouTube. This public forum allows you to express your opinions and ideas on wildlife management in our state. This RAC considers your feedback on the proposals before us today and reports them to the Wildlife Board. The Wildlife Board, not the RAC, is charged with setting wildlife policy for our state. Wildlife management is a complex and sometimes it is emotionally charged. We all have ideas and opinions about what is best for Utah's wildlife. That's why we're here today, and that's a good thing. We encourage those who want to express their opinion at today's meeting to fill out a comment card, and I think those can be found in the back on that table. There's no one here. We expect those in attendance to respect the people who speak, especially those who hold views that don't align with their own. Respectful behavior helps facilitate efficient meetings where RAC members can listen, digest, and address the concerns, ideas, and proposals being presented for consideration. Disrespectful behavior includes booing, yelling, cheering, or laughing while someone is speaking. You can also help maintain a respectful space by referring to people by name instead of descriptors of their physical characteristics, demeanor, or gender. If this behavior occurs, the RAC chair will remind attendees to be respectful. If the behavior continues, the applicable individual or individuals will be asked to leave. Lastly, please help reduce distractors during the meeting by putting your phone on silent, and if you need to take a call, we ask that you step outside. We'd like to go around and introduce those RAC members that are in attendance at the meeting, starting, oh, hey, we got Trish here. Let's start over here with Trish. No.
There we go. I'm Trish.
And you weren't here. This is your first meeting back. So if
Yes.
you want to tell us just a little bit more about yourself, and if it's anybody's, I think everybody else has been here once already, but go ahead and tell us a little more about yourself, even though some of us know you.
Okay. I'm Trish Dean. I have been on the RAC previously. I can't really remember when, but it was a while back. And I am a Grand County Commissioner, so I'm representing elected officials.
Matt Farnworth, Spring Glen, representing sportsmen.
Jake Palma, I'm with the BLM. I'm the field manager down in Monticello.
I'm Cash Stallings, representing public at large.
Charles Fisher, representing sportsmen.
Daniel Luke, I'm representing the Forest Service.
Brad Richmond, non-consumptive.
All right, and I'm Scoop Lannery. I'm the RAC chair. And then from the division, we have Craig Walker and Trina Hedrick online. And then here in attendance, we have, who do we all have here? We got Dustin back there. Who else was participating in the meeting today?
Yeah, we have several of our district biologists, Joe Christensen, Dustin Mitchell's our wildlife manager, Wade Paskett, and Ian Montgomery's here as well. We have Lieutenant J.D. Abbott, and then we have Rusty, who will speak to us later today. And then online, we have Justin Hart, who's our regional aquatics manager. And then we have, looks like some board members online too, so welcome.
Yeah, we got, looks like Ken Johnson and Gary Nilsson are our board members. And Justin Oliver. Who's that?
Bob Christensen.
Oh, and Bob Christensen. Hey, welcome everybody. I'm like trying to read all these little names up there. So if everybody's had a chance to read the agenda and the minutes, is there any comment on that? If not, we can accept the motion to approve the agenda and minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda and minutes. Second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, that looks like it's unanimous. We don't have any RAC members online, do we?
I don't think so.
Okay. All right, we'll go to the board meeting update. So yeah, I have the wrong one pulled up. Hang on one second.
Okay, while he's looking for that, I will give my regional update. All right. Good evening. Thanks for being here. Just want to give a quick regional update. First, we'll start with our aquatics section. We have our Moab crew, our Moab Native Aquatics crew is be hiring a new biologist. That program's been a little short-staffed the last year. We've had a few people leave those positions, move on to different jobs, and so we're trying to catch up and fill those positions. So we're excited to announce that position and hopefully have interviews in the next few weeks. Also, our AIS biologists in Price have been doing some surveys along the Colorado River, looking for AIS species that could be in the river because they found them upriver in Colorado. But so we're doing our due diligence to try to detect anything that might be floating down our way. And then our habitat section just this week has been starting to trap and relocate beavers. And so where there's problem beavers and they're causing nuisance issues, we have spots for them throughout the region. And so that's an exciting thing that they're doing, working with a local contractor who's working with us and to relocate those throughout the entire region. And if you're interested in where those are exactly, let me know. I can get you the translocation list. We're also farming at Gordon Creek, which is our WMA in Carbon County. And then we're starting to do some more habitat projects. We were on hold there for a few weeks. The fire danger was really high. And there were a lot of restrictions out there. We got some moisture, as you know, this last week or two. And so some fire restrictions were let up. And so we've started to put those projects back on the ground again. Law enforcement has been really busy, of course. Officers working around the region. They've been, of course, it's the hunts have started, and so they're working hunts and patrolling. And there's been several trespass cases that they're working on. If you see anything, give us a call or text us, and we'll be on it. And then our outreach section has a few events going on. We have a bat night in Moab, and we're excited for that. It's on September 10th. If you're interested in that, you can go out on Eventbrite and sign up. It is full. There is a waiting list, and we've just realized that we can accommodate more people than we thought. So we're going to be reaching out to those people on the waiting list and hopefully bumping them up and allowing them to attend. So if you want to go to that Moab Bat Night, go to eventbrite.com and search for Moab Bat Night, and you'll be able to sign up. It's a free event, of course. We've done it a few times in Moab. We did it in Price last month. It's a big success. So, and then we have also a waterfowl clinic planned for Emery County out at Desert Lake. That'll be on September 13th, and there'll be more information coming out about that. But again, that'll be an Eventbrite type event where you sign up. It's out now. It's posted now, so you can sign up, and it's for youth and adults too. So it's come on out and join us and learn about how to hunt waterfowl. Maybe on this slide too, I'll also mention that we held our mule deer meetings in August. Thanks for all those who came. We held a meeting in Price. We held a meeting in Monticello. We had, we didn't know what to expect, right? So I was pleased with the turnout. We had some really good discussions at both locations. Thank you, RAC members who attended those. They're not done. We took, it was the first meeting. We got a lot of feedback on what people wanted to see and some thoughts that they had on how to grow mule deer. There was a lot of comments on how to hunt mule deer too. These groups are more focused on how we can grow mule deer. And so, internally, we're going to kind of discuss on how to move forward, but we'll have some additional meetings in November at both locations. So be on the lookout for that, and we'll get that information out as it comes. And then our wildlife section's been busy. They've been doing pronghorn classifications. And then maybe I'll mention that this last week, we met with some officials for the city of Moab, just kind of informally, to discuss CWD. As you might know, there's CWD in the Moab Valley, and it's pretty prevalent. And we're now working with the city to try to, teach them about CWD and some things that citizens can do to help control that spread. And we had a really good meeting. First of hopefully several to come. And we've, I think, initially agreed on some really good outreach efforts to team up with Moab on a lot of, some podcasts we can be a part of. Their science program that they have presentations for. I think we're on their radar now. So that's kind of the first step. We're also going to meet with the town of Castle Valley, I think in October, and kind of give the same presentation. So that's been really good. And it's been well received. And hopefully we'll work on some solutions with them that will help the issues in the future. And that's all I got. So with that, I'll take any questions if I can't answer them. Our biologists are in the house and they can answer anything. So what do you got?
Any questions for Chris? Well, thanks, Chris.
Those
Sorry,
beavers that you're moving, are you closing those down to trapping when you move them, or are they still open?
We're closing them down to,
The areas you're moving beavers to?
Yeah.
You're gonna close it down to trapping?
no, they're open to trapping. So yeah.
Okay.
Any additional questions for Chris? I'll just say I was able to attend the meeting in San Juan County. It was pretty awesome. We had a lot of different groups of people there, and I thought it was well received and got a lot of good ideas out of it. So thanks for doing that. Moving on to the Wildlife Board meeting update. So there was the meeting was held on August 21st. There was a motion regarding the surrenders and variances to approve as presented, and that passed unanimously. There was a motion to approve as presented regarding the sportsman draw and group applications, and that also passed unanimously. For the tagging requirements, there was a motion that it was approved as presented with the addition of an additional photo, a fourth photo for evidence of sex. And just want to point out that one originated right here in this RAC from Matt Farnsworth. So his very first RAC meeting, he had a motion get approved and go all the way to the board and pass. And now we don't have to haul out a hunk of junk, like he said. So yeah. Then after that, there was regarding the additional cow permits. This motion passed with 4 in favor and 2 recusals due to their direct involvement. And it was to be approved as presented. For the additional drought permits, this was also approved. There was a motion to approve the additional 19 bison permits on the Henry Mountains as presented by the division. And for the CWMU Advisory Committee, there was an action item to approve the membership of Gary Webb, and that one also passed unanimously. So that takes us to these first few items are informational. We don't have to take any action on them. I think we've all had the chance to watch the presentations and see what that's about. But we do have Craig Walker online. So if there are any questions or any clarifications that you'd like to give us at this time, Craig, regarding your presentation.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. No, I just wanted to give kind of a brief recap for those of you that had an opportunity to view the presentation. The study was undertaken in partnership with Utah State University. Drs. Chase Lamborn and Jordan Smith were the leads on that project, and they were out of the Outdoor Recreation and Tourism unit up at Utah State University. The findings from the survey showcase the fact that Utah does maintain a very diverse fishing community that's made up of a wide array of interests. Individuals like to fish for various species. They like to fish at various locations, and they like to use a variety of gears when they go fishing. And they are diverse, as I stated. However, there is one underlying commonality among all of our anglers in the state, and that is that the primary reason for people going fishing is the fact that they want to escape and pursue solitude. That is something that everybody is desiring, regardless of how they go about fishing. Another major finding is that anglers who consistently participate in fishing are the anglers who were introduced to fishing at a young age by a mentor or a parent. These core anglers are also, in turn, the anglers that are most likely to take our youth fishing, which is kind of the passing of the torch, if you will, and sets the stage for consistent participation in the state. Probably that positive feedback loop is the reason why we've been lucky enough to maintain 12% per capita participation in our state among fishing interests for the past decade. So based on the findings from our survey, the division will be adjusting our management of fishing opportunities in the coming years. We're going to be looking to cater to the needs of these various different subgroups of our fishing community, those diverse interests I mentioned, conducting targeted marketing and messaging to those groups, managing water bodies to provide a diverse array of experiences, similar to what many of you have probably experienced at Schofield Reservoir, where we have a wide array of species that allow for a very diverse group of anglers to experience fishing opportunities at that water body. Additionally, we'll be looking to disperse pressure to minimize crowding and maintain solitude where possible. And we really want to focus on the maintenance, improvement, and creation of viable desired fisheries in rural areas that, again, can afford people that solitude they're looking for. And finally, we'll be focusing on meeting the needs of our core anglers. As I mentioned, they are kind of critical to our retention of anglers moving forward. And we want to ensure that we have that per capita participation maintained around that 12% level moving forward. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that additional detail, Craig. Are there any questions from the RAC for Craig? Nobody in the audience, any other questions? What online comments do we have?
We don't have any.
No online comments. Any comments from the RAC?
Just, I know Chase quite well, and he is an avid sportsman. So I think it's really cool that he was the researcher behind this study. So I think it's probably pretty good stuff.
Awesome. Thanks, Trish. Any additional comments?
I guess I have a question is how are we going to look at these survey results and bring recommendations to the RAC in the future for fisheries management?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things we'll be looking to do is change regulations where we need to. One thing we're really concerned with moving forward is being able to provide the quality of angling that we currently provide with a growing number of anglers out on the water. And as we start to diversify our fisheries, disperse people across the landscape, we want to make sure that the fish populations we're allowing them to tack into are maintained healthy. And to do that, we need to make sure that they stay at densities where people are going to have satisfactory catch rates. And to do that, we're going to have to probably adjust our regulations. So it's kind of a trickle-down effect. So that's likely something you'll be seeing in the coming years.
Any more comments or questions on this item? All right, thank you, Craig. Appreciate it. All right, on to the next item. So Blue Ribbon Economic Survey results, Trina Hedrick. So yeah, Trina, if there's anything you'd like to clarify or elaborate on before we ask questions.
Sure, thanks. Hi, everyone. And I just wanted to highlight just how impressive these results are from the economic study. I was blown away by the results, and I think it just really goes to show how important it's going to be in the future to maintain the per capita participation rate that Craig mentions, to take the results from both of these studies where we ask anglers, what keeps you coming back? What are you willing to pay for? What are you seeking when you go fishing? And just try to provide those opportunities into the future, because it clearly brings in a lot to Utah's economy. It's extremely important provides a great deal of jobs. And people are really, I think, becoming accustomed to the high quality fishing that we are providing. And it'll be a challenge, but with surveys like this, we have the information we need to move forward. So with that, I'll just take any questions.
Any questions from the RAC? All right. No questions from the audience? What do we have for online comments on this one? All right. Any RAC comments?
I'll just make a comment. I think it goes towards both these studies. I've got 2 young daughters at home, and some of my favorite things I got to do with them is just take them up to the mountain and fish for an afternoon and a day. And there is a little bit of money that goes into it, but again, the enjoyment that we get out of having that experience together and teaching those skills and watching them have a great time reeling in a fish, like those are priceless. And so for me, in a lot of ways, seeing how much money is being put into our fishing hobbies was just back that up to show that people got to get more out of it than something selfish. And so I'm very appreciative of the work that the division did in putting this stuff together.
How many of those billions of dollars do you account for, Cash?
Very small amount. I'm too cheap.
Any additional comments from the RAC? I guess we don't have any comments from the audience. All right, that was it. That was easy, Trina. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, on to the next item, number 7, mid-plan review, mountain goat and bighorn sheep with Rusty Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I could just maybe give a brief commentary. Both these plans, the bighorn and mountain goat statewide plans, were written by the same committee back in 2018. We reconvened that committee, and the overwhelming consensus was that these are both really good plans. They're visionary at the time, really forward thinking, and the bighorn plan especially really helped repair some relationships with the ag community and provide a lot of partnerships and inroads. And we work really, really well with the wool growers these days because of this plan. And so overall, they're really happy and didn't want to make a lot of changes other than just some updates to some code references and a few other things. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, thanks, Rusty. Any questions from the RAC? All right, and any online comments? Okay, comments from the RAC.
You made a comment at the Central RAC that I just wanted to kind of commend you on. I had a chance to watch that. I don't want to, not a direct quote, but you said something along the lines of having some sheep are better than having no sheep. And I really appreciated that comment and that outlook, and look forward to what that brings going forward.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It just came to a point in Utah where if we're really, if we're not going to accept any risk at all, then we're kind of done managing bighorn sheep. You know, all the easy places are taken. And so we've kind of taken a step back and said, okay, we don't want to be done transplanting bighorn sheep. You know, where's the next places where maybe we're taking on a little bit more risk. But like you said, I probably said it a lot less eloquently than that, but I'd rather have, some sheep than no sheep, and we're looking long-term here. So thank you for that.
Any more comments from the RAC?
I might ask a question. Sorry, I'm going backward. Scoots,
That's
like
just fine.
we've already done questions.
We'll allow it this once.
I mean, you spoke, Rusty, to kind of mending that relationship with wool growers. Can you just elaborate on that just a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's no secret, in years past, maybe we didn't have the greatest working relationship with the ag community, especially when it came to bighorn sheep. We're kind of at odds, and that was maybe partly our fault, but also just kind of the overall environment of what was happening in the West. with the Payette decision in Idaho and things like that, people got really defensive that, hey, bighorn sheep are going to be the reason that I get kicked off my allotment, and I don't want anything to do with that. And so we took a step back and saw that, and we've adopted the approach in Utah, which is pretty unique in the West, that we're going to defend the wool growers, we're going to defend the ag community, and we're not going to try to grow bighorn sheep to their detriment. And so we're gonna work together, and we're gonna find mutual wins. And if there's a willing buyer, willing seller situation, great. Then maybe we can step in and do something there. But we're not gonna advocate for any changes or reductions to grazing on allotments or private property in the name of bighorn sheep. So, yeah. So that went a long way, and we've got some really great friends and partners in that world now.
Were there any online comments, Chris?
No.
Okay. Any more comments from the RAC? All right. Well, if that's the case, then we'll entertain a motion.
I'd make a motion to approve as presented.
I'll second.
We have a motion by Matt and a second by Cash. All in favor, let's take a roll real quick. Trish? Matt?
Yes.
Jacob?
Yes.
Cash?
Yes.
Charles?
Yes.
Daniel?
Yes.
And Brad?
Yes.
All right, motion passes unanimously. Thank you. All right, last item on the agenda. What time is it? Are we cooking or what?
6:27.
All right. I'm expecting some more comments. Those meetings are coming. You.
Don't worry, we're gonna get bogged
Yeah. They put all the hard stuff on one meeting. All right, so item number 8, Southeastern Region Big Game Management Plans. Dustin Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's good to be back on my home turf here. Been going through all the racks, so it's nice to see some friendly faces, some familiar faces. I'd just like to give a little summary of this. You all have probably seen the presentation, but every 5 years we review and update our unit deer plans, and so our region was up for this year to do. If there's a boundary or a population objective increase, then we go through the public process. And within our region, we had 3 units that we're proposing an increase on. And so that's why we're here.
All right, thanks, Dustin. Any questions from the RAC for Dustin?
On the LaSalle increase, kind of a hot spot for CWD. And it seems like in the past, the stance has always been, let's reduce those numbers. Can you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And so with that, like I said, we update, we review these plans, we look at our range trend. We've seen that from their last readings that they did. Habitat looks good, body condition on the deer that we've collared or captured and collared and sampled throughout the years looking good still. And so unit wide, we don't look like we're hitting a carrying capacity for that part of it. Chronic wasting diseases is a big deal on the LaSalles. And so this year we've implemented a few new CWD hunts this winter, where we're going to try to focus on those areas around like Moab and Castle Valley, which are the hot spots really contributing to CWD and the spread, and try to remove some of those bucks that may be transferring that more. So unit wide, we're comfortable with increasing the population there, but we want to decrease or minimize the spread. So those hunts, we're kind of using that to mitigate it.
All right, I'll ask one. So I feel like early on in the RAC cycle, there was just a lot of focus on the new model, and I'll ask more about that in a minute. But instead, I think I kind of want to focus my question on, we've got these goals that we're setting, or I guess we call them objectives. But I feel like when it comes to our deer herd statewide, and particularly these units here, we rarely hit that or come close. And so I guess one thing that I'm curious about is that what is really different about the plan, the unit plan from the previous 5 years to this 5 years that we feel like, okay, this cycle, we will hit this objective. Like, what have we changed besides just the goal we're trying to hit? What did we change about how we're going to get there?
Yeah, it's a good question, and a lot of it is the same from previous time. They're like you said, goals that we're trying to hit. Sometimes we don't hit them, sometimes we can. We're doing a lot of habitat work, so we're going that route to try to increase. We've worked with UDOT in the past for highway collisions to try to reduce the amount that we have there to increase. Water structures, we're looking into that. Some of these deer meetings that were spoken of before and maybe implemented to help that way also.
So I guess a follow-up question to that one, and I've never gotten the opportunity to sit on one of these unit committees or anything like that, but you had a lot of good people come together and you provided information. And so when we picked these numbers, where do they kind of come from, in the sense that, is it like, hey, the model says if we hit these ideal conditions that we can probably get to this, or is there a little gut feeling behind it? Like what kind of prompts the number that we arrive at?
Yeah, so these numbers, it was kind of funny on most of these. It was kind of brought up in the committee that would use the biggest difference between, and I don't want to dive into the model stuff too much right now, because it's not a new model. That's some of the confusion. It's just different values that we're using. But between those old values that we were using and the new values, kind of the biggest difference there was what we wanted to bump that objective up to that way. And interestingly, I don't know if Brad wants to talk about it, but on the Manti, we've actually gone back to what the previous objective was of 38,000. And so he knew what he was doing years ago.
So I've got a question. A year ago, or roughly a year ago, there were some studies proposed that did not pass because the management plan was coming up and they felt like that they didn't want to implement those studies right prior to a new plan coming. Are you aware of what I'm referring to, such as the 3-point or better areas? Yes. And some of those?
So those studies are being implemented this year.
So that was my question.
And and that was for the statewide plan, probably what you're speaking about.
So they're going to be implemented in this new plan?
Well, not in these plans specifically. I don't think we had anything in our region, but throughout the state, they are implementing those so that we can see what the effects are and then incorporate.
I see. Thank you.
So, I mean, it's obviously we don't really want to talk about it much, but can you talk to me a little bit? So I won't use the word new model. Can you talk to me a little bit about the new parameters? How about that?
Yeah.
I feel like, and the reason I asked is like kind of building off of this, we just did this giant statewide deer plan that was a bear to push through. And there was a lot of public pushback and ideas and things we want to do and da-da-da-da-da. And then I feel like we get that sucker implemented, and then I feel like I'm watching a presentation for RAC, and it's like, oh, hey, by the way, we got a new and better way to do this. And I'm like, well, aren't we a year late? So can we speak to maybe a little bit about, was this discussed or known about when we were doing the previous plan? Are we not concerned about it? How does it affect it? I guess that's kind of what I'm a little concerned in the timing. How about that?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. Some of the timing, I don't know that it was talked about before the statewide plan. I don't know. Maybe Scoot could talk about that. He was on that. You were on that committee, right? But I will just briefly go through. So yeah, some of the confusion even within the agency was new model term that came up. So it's the same model that we've been using for decades. It's just in those parameters that we use, which is fawn survival, adult doe survival, buck to doe ratio, fawn to doe ratio, and harvest. Those are kind of the parameters that we use in that model. Beforehand, we didn't have as much data that we have now because we've been doing so much on these studies to collect new data specific to units in the state. And so with that, we've actually got values that we can use on these units. Before it was just kind of a standard and average or a constant value that we'd use in those. And so now we're actually forcing the model to use the data that we've been collecting that's probably more realistic to these units.
See, that makes me feel a little bit better. I like that. I like that answer. So basically, we had a model and there were some standardized numbers that we were having to use because we didn't have enough data on the specific units that we are talking about. But now we do have enough data that we feel comfortable to implement it in the model. And so we're able to get better results out of it that are unit specific.
Exactly. Yep. The model's only as good as what you put into it. Right.
Yeah.
Hey, Dustin, thanks for all the work on this. As far as like habitat type projects to achieve some of these goals, what are the types of projects that you have in mind, and how can we, as the federal agencies, BLM, and I'm assuming the Forest Service as well, how can we support some of these objectives and project goals?
Yeah, no, great question. And you guys are right now through WRI and that we're partnering on a lot of different projects that are going to benefit mule deer and other wildlife species, but moth and scatter projects, some prescribed burn projects that are hopefully going to happen soon with these restrictions being lifted. Those will, on the summer range especially, that'll really help us. Probably some of these water structures too that we're looking at, a lot of them would, or some of them would probably be on BLM, and so partnering up on those would be helpful.
Can I just say, Jacob, that's music to my ears to hear you ask him that question. I love it. You too, Daniel. Go ahead, Tripp.
Speaking to habitat, I mean, you mentioned that the habitat is good, and yet I feel like the last couple of years, drought has been pretty prevalent on the landscape. I know Division of Water Rights at the CCP that I saw you at recently talked about soil moisture being so extremely low. So anyways, just how does that equate to your overall?
That's a good question too. And that's every 5 years we do these range trend studies, and that's just looking at the trend between those 5-year intervals that the desirable components index number is actually increased on those. And so it's just looking at that unit at total habitat and putting a value on it, and the good category is actually grown. Our poor to negative categories have shrunk, which is good. So it's just looking at a trend of that. But yeah, this year, I mean, it's going to pull it down when we look at another 5 years, but hopefully we get some moisture to pull that back up.
Any more questions? I do have one. You mentioned, I think I remember you saying this in your presentation, that the objectives are a number that we're supposed to, that you want to maintain the herd at or below that objective. Is that correct for mule deer?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, we've got to manage to it. We're mandated to manage to an objective. And so that's what we are managing to, that we're below. We don't want to below, would like to be at it.
And if you hit that objective, does that automatically initiate female harvest?
So no, it doesn't. And we would look at, maybe there's specific areas on the range that's being hammered or something where we might target a doe hunt there or something. But we would look at probably increasing it as long as the habitat can support it. That we don't feel like we're at carrying capacity.
Okay. So it's not like elk where you're like mandated to keep it below a certain number. Is that correct?
Well, at that value.
Okay. So with any of these are there any of these new objectives that you're thinking like, man, we could really get there, and then we'd have to do,
and then bump back up, or
bump it up, or start harvesting females or something?
Not with these values.
Okay. Thanks. Any other comments, or sorry, not comments, questions? All right. We do have some online comments.
Yeah, 2 people answered this survey question. One strongly agreed and one somewhat agreed. The comments which you all received in the email before this meeting and had the opportunity to review, I just basically stated support for these for the plans and the objective and the idea of growing more deer in the state and on these units.
All right, thanks. All right, any comments?
I was lucky enough to sit on this this board, or I forget how you call them, that came up with these numbers of the DWR, and it was a diverse group of folks that asked a lot of great questions from both landowner, cattle, Mule Deer Foundation, a bunch of different folks, so, and the federal agencies. It was good to see it. I tried to put in questions that I thought you guys would have, which I nailed some of them, and some of them were outside of the box, but we did talk about things like CWD pretty extensively, and rangeland health, as well as habitat health. So a lot of that stuff was discussed, and these were the numbers we thought we could really hang our hats on.
Thanks, Charles. Other comments?
Yeah, I'll comment up. I'm really glad we have so many wildlife board members here on the meeting tonight. I have a lot of personal reservations with the unit-wide objectives that we set statewide. It's not just, I want to be really clear, I'm not just picking on these three, it's statewide. I seriously question our ability to meet these goals, especially when we look at our trend and so basically our success rate in hitting those goals. And I often wonder if we're maybe reaching a little too high to the stars when we say, hey, we can get here. Like with proper management, proper opportunity, we can hit these goals. And I deeply question that on a lot of the units we have. And then why I struggle with it is because I think it bleeds into a public perception. You know, when you have a press release that says that statewide we have an objective to have 405,000 deer, and we're at 330, and by the way, we're going to issue more buck tags this year, the public goes wild. And, you know, and I might understand that buck permits don't determine our statewide deer population, but a lot of other people don't. And so we have this huge objective up there for a statewide deer population, and we're not even coming close. And I'm not saying we should set goals that we can't, that are just, you know, easy walk in the parks either. There's got to be a balance there, but I think a lot of these are maybe a little too high when we look at our trend of reaching them. And Elk Ridge is one of, like, we're not talking about that tonight, but I think it's a good example of, we got an objective to have 2,000 deer down there. When have we ever gotten close to that? Even half. So why do we have an objective of 2,000 if that's the case? So I really struggle. And I also really struggle with this concept that we can have maybe deer numbers that we've had in the past when we've got so much elk on the landscape. And I'm not against elk. I love elk, and I understand that there's differences between elk and deer and what they eat and do. But I do think there's only so much mountain for livestock, elk, and deer. And you run out of mountain, especially with how many people we have out there recreating. And so what I'm just trying to express in my comment here is I think moving forward, especially as we see how this current statewide deer plan that we're on goes, I think we need to have a lot bigger reality check on what can the statewide deer population really be, which is really just a summation of our unit-wide objectives. And I think we need to deeply evaluate that. You know, when I see the LaSalle's go from our goal up of, 8,000, 7,000, up to 11,500, I'm like, that is a lot of deer to have on LaSalle's compared to what we've been able to do in the past. I think for me, that's of the ones we're discussing tonight, that's probably the hardest one to swallow. But I want to be clear, I love mule deer. I grew up hunting mule deer. The whole reason I got into big game hunting was my dad dragging me out doing mule deer hunting. I love mule deer. I want to see more on the mountain. I want to support that as much as I can, but I also want us to try to be realistic in the goals that we set.
Charlie, you were on that committee. Can you speak to any contentious, discussions that you guys might have had?
Yeah, we discussed that a little bit, actually, quite a bit, about if we're putting too many animals on the landscape. That's why we reached out to TJ, the Habitat, talked to him about ongoing projects as well as the health of habitat projects that have been implemented on some of these units. And then we also discussed what the repercussions of not increasing. This would be which would be things like doe tags. We'd be back in this rack cycle next year talking about doe tags. And whether we wanted to swallow increasing that number to a number that we know the models are better, are put together better now to show that we can sustain that level, or to use the old model and then end up harvesting does later on and keeping it at a lower number, just because that's what we had before. And on some of these units, some of it was discussed. Some people out there wanted much higher numbers to show that the DWR should be pushing and pushing. And we kind of walked some of that back to say, you know, the habitat can only sustain so much. Some of these federal land management partners only have so much latitude to do these kinds of projects. We need to be realistic with what the landscape can handle, what's planned in the future, and then this is a 5-year thing where we review this. So it just happened to hit right after the mule deer plan came out. But since we have better metrics to put in, we should use better metrics. I don't think anybody at this table would think if I have better metrics to put in, I'm not going to use them. So.
And then can you speak specifically, what do you guys talk about the CWD and the LaSalle's, and because Matt has already mentioned that. Also.
Yeah, we did. We discussed the CWD pretty in depth, all the way down to having them bring up the CWD map to show where all the positive hits were on the LaSalle's. There's definitely a higher concentration within Castle Valley and then the Moab area, but CWD is prevalent amongst the whole LaSalle area. But we'd already decided to implement these hunts to try and do some combating of the CWD. So to not implement those hunts at all and not see how this played out, and to start changing plans based off of that without even implementing that seemed like it was premature.
I've got a question, and I don't know who to pose it to, maybe the biologist, but why such a concentration in certain areas of CWD as opposed to others? What are some of the factors contributing to that?
So really it's density of deer in an area. Like in Moab, we've got feeders, water sources where all these deer are just congregating together. They spread it through saliva, through urine, feces, just the environment there. So it's just at higher densities in certain areas.
Any more comments? So I do have a comment. So I actually sat on that unit plan 5 years ago. And that's when the data we were using was from 2019. The last number we had on Elk Ridge, correct me if I'm wrong, Dustin, 600 deer, right? And I think it was proposed at the time to have the objective be at 1,000. And I was one of those annoying ones, Charles, that was like, hey, freaking put 2,000 so we can show everybody that we have a big problem here, because it was trending down and getting pretty ugly. I'm not saying that arbitrarily setting that number of 2,000 had any bearing on what happened with that deer herd. But if you look at it now, since 2019, it increased to 1,150, and some of that's probably with the new model data. Was the new model data used on Elk Ridge, or was that the existing? Okay. But even a year before, it was 950. And so you're still looking at least a 50%, 60% increase. If that happened, if that 50 to 60% increase happened again over the next 5 years, we'd be knocking right at the doorstep of 2,000 deer. And Elk Ridge, prior to, I guess, losing Beef Basin and whatever else, I'm not even sure. I don't know that it's a habitat issue or if it's more predator, whatever it is up there. But there was way more deer. I mean, 5,600 was the number before, from the previous plan, before it went to 2,000. And so, anyway, just a comment I had. And if any of that is not right, Dustin, please correct me, because I'm going off of memory 100%.
I would like to just maybe talk to that a little bit on those. So 5 years ago, the entire state looked, and you probably know this, but we looked at all of our objectives for every unit to see if they were realistic or not, because some were like Elk Ridge 50, whatever, 100, it probably wasn't realistic to get to in that 5-year interval. And so a lot of units 5 years ago, we dropped the objective down just because of what you're talking about. So we are very mindful of that and trying to be realistic with those objectives.
Hey, while you're up there, one quick question. So obviously the population objective is increasing on a lot of these general units. Those tags are set based on buck-to-doe ratios. Does that increased population count, is that going to sway tag numbers, or will that be based on whether or not your buck-to-doe ratios come out where you expect they will?
And so with that population, like I said in the presentation, we didn't necessarily grow 3,000 deer, right? It's just a better estimate of where we were. So it's kind of the same number of deer that were out there. So realistically, we should be within that 15 to 17 bucks per 100 does when we do our postseason count again. So tag numbers, it will be based on what we see then. If the population really did grow 3,500 deer or whatever, then yeah, there would be some room to harvest more bucks that way. But I would say it probably not likely.
Thanks, Dustin. Yeah. Any more comments? Did I already ask you for? Okay. Well, if that's the case, then let's entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve as presented.
I'll second the motion.
Motion by Amanda, second by Charles. Any discussion on the motion? All right, let's take a roll call. Let's start with Trish.
Aye.
Matt,
Yes.
Jake,
Yes.
Cash,
Yes.
Charles,
Yes.
Daniel,
Yes.
and Brad.
Yes.
All right, motion passes unanimously. And I believe that's it. Is there anything else? All right, motion to adjourn. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second the motion.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, meeting adjourned.